Welcome to another episode of Break Time, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the director's cut of I Laid Down My Life For You by JPEGMAFIA. Now, with this being only my second video on the channel, you guys have no idea how I feel about JPEGMAFIA or I Laid Down My Life For You. Well, let me just say, you can rest easy knowing that I Laid Down My Life For You was my favorite rap album of 2025. It really felt like the culmination of everything Peggy was trying to get at throughout his career. You know, it was like Peggy's always straddled the line of being this very catchy, very mainstream influenced artist while still existing on the fringe, creating his own new sounds and adding his own spin to things and doing things in a way that most other artists wouldn't even think of doing. So yeah, we're not reviewing the original I Laid Down My Life For You here. And none of the tracks from the official release are going to get touched on here. You know, maybe later in another video we can get into my more fleshed out thoughts on what I think of that album. As you know, it is my favorite of 2024, so I could talk at length about it. But yeah, man, let's get into the director's cut without further ado. First and foremost, let me say this. It's obvious why these were left off of the official release. A lot of these tracks end up sounding unfinished or just out of place in the track listing. It's obvious that, like, going into I Lay Down My Life For You, Peggy had very concise, tight ideas as to what he wanted this to be. And just a lot of the tracks that end up here don't fit what that overarching idea turned out to be. But yeah, man, let's get into it. The record kicks off with a brand new intro featuring infant Peggy and his father singing Bob Marley's Rasta Man Chant. And honestly, man, it's a really sweet moment. I'd hate to meet the person that this can't put a smile on their face. And I'd just like to state for the record that Peggy took to X to state that the title of the track, IS-231, it was named that because that was the name of the public school that he went to when he lived in Queens. But yeah, man, overall, it's not the most revolutionary way to intro an album, but a really nice one nonetheless. Protect the Cross being the single for the director's cut makes perfect sense, as it feels like it was snubbed from the final track list. It's a complete, structured, fun, catchy track in the same vein as Don't Rely on Other Men. There's a rebellious edge to this one. It's very politically charged, which, being fair, could be said about a lot of JPEGMAFIA's work. And yeah, it almost feels like his revenge for the Trump presidency win, going as far to say, white bitches ain't vote for Kamala, they lied. I love the vocal This Generation sample from A Tribe Called Quest's This Generation. And here we get more Drake shots for icing on the cake, going as far as to instigate with lines like, Op list don't trip me. I aim when I'm rolling like Wheelchair Jimmy. Why did you say you was gonna fuck me up last year? Now I do not hear a peep. Probably because you know next time I see you, you're gonna end up right next to Peep. Damn. On Jordan Rules, Peggy shows once again why he's the king of beat switches and one of the most important producers that hip-hop has to offer today. I love the This Tiananmen Square, homies taking their plans bar. But honestly, the song as a whole feels a bit underbaked. But as far as tracks on a director's cut go, it's pretty cool. It's raw, explosive, and unpredictable. Cult Status gave me the one thing that I felt was missing from the original I Lay Down My Life For You album. JPEG rapping over that insane car alarm malfunction ass beat. Now, does it feel 100% complete? No, it definitely feels like Peggy might have abandoned this when he came to the realization that was going to be omitted from the final release of the record, but I love it nonetheless. The track's a vessel for Peggy to talk his shit, referencing his collaboration with Ye last year, denying any need for award validation as that's not where he's going to find what he's looking for. Hell, the song as a whole could be looked at as him acknowledging his place in hip-hop today. He is cult status. He has a cult fan base that supports him throughout all of his endeavors, and it's well earned. Coke or Dope is the first dud for me here. Now, what I will say is the sounds that Peggy chose for this record are extremely interesting. Isolated, the percussion rhythm that bounces between channels sounds like somebody breaking up substances, and honestly, that's really fitting. And the way it's manipulated in speed is really impressive even for JPEG. It works better than it has any right to. Coke or Dope replaces Jihad Joe in the track listing, and with the inclusion of that punk-inspired detour, I think it's fair to say that Coke or Dope may have been the original version of Jihad Joe. And yeah, it turns out my instinct served me, as he confirmed it on X. Is you coked up or doped up is a hilarious question to ask over some boundary pushing abstract hip hop. Next up is the titular I Laid Down My Life For You, and it's pretty interesting that the title track of all things was left off the official release of the album, but honestly, listening to it, it makes sense. Unfortunately, there's nothing that this track does that isn't explored better or more effectively on the official track listing. It has the same sense of whimsicality that tracks like I'll Be Right There and Don't Put Anything on the Bible, which end up being standouts standouts on the original track list, but here with its inclusion, it just feels like a bit of a redundancy having such a light track. It's a sweet little break from the onslaught we're subjected to with tracks like Ex-Military and JPEG Ultra, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't find myself coming back to it that often. My compliments to Buzzy Lee, though. She sounds absolutely stunning. Boy You Should Know has a big fentanyl tester from Scaring the Hoes vibe. It's fun, bouncy, and we get another R&B songstress sample here. Here we get a vocal chop of Sierra's Body Party. And it never ceases to amaze me that how Peggy's able to manipulate these samples in which, like, he'll do something to it that makes it completely unique, but also it still retains this familiarity that you know exactly what it is when you hear it. In the second half, we have this dirty, disgusting beat switch, feeling like you're walking through a Forever 21 and then all of a sudden you find yourself falling through the floor into a sewer. And then we get a third switch, and it's glittery, bright, jangly, sounding music box-esque. The audacity of JPEG to completely rework a beat when you only have a minute left after already giving us a whole other beat switch. And that's what makes him arguably the best producer in hip-hop today. It's a constant evolution. He never sits on anything long enough to even remotely wear out its welcome. Boy You Should Know is a definite standout. And the final track before we get into the bonus disc is Allah, serving as the outro to the director cut LP. And on one hand, it definitely works in context to the obvious religious symbolism of the record. Having a heavy focus on religious iconography like the cross that sits as a focal point on both versions of the album covers. However, though it is a fitting outro, I much preferred the more downbeat, contemplative, dejected I Recovered From This outro that we got on the original release. It just felt like we left that record with more to chew on, having that being our last impressions. Allah is a really nice addition, and I'm glad it's here. I just don't know how necessary it feels in the context of it being a new outro. The vocal sample here is really catchy, pulling from Lil Durk's Pele Coat, and it balances worship and street rhetoric, mirroring Peggy in a lot of ways. Now with this too, we start with What the Hip Hop Hell Is This? And just by namesake, it reminds me a lot of LP's What Kind of Rapping Is This? But yeah, this track is as hard-hitting as it is hilarious. Bars like, yeah, I heard all your beats where it's the hits. You keep cheating, we might have to castrate. And Malcolm ain't die for this shit. Marcus ain't die for this shit. Rose ain't sit for you, bitch. Display the incredible charisma that lives in Peggy's music. There's a sense of regality to Come and Get Me. It bounces back and forth between extravagant strings and visceral distorted guitars, with a juxtaposition that could be seen as symbolic of the way Peggy constructs his music. It's easily one of the best additions to I Lay Down My Life. It feels like a lightning in the bottle moment. Every element, no matter how complementary or contradictory, meshes together with perfection. That crooning breakdown at the end is honestly beautiful and icing on the cake. At the end of the day, it is just another vehicle for Peggy to talk his shit, but on Come and Get Me, he does it with such precision and purpose that it's really a surprise that it didn't make the final cut, especially since he never passes up the chance to shove a middle finger in the face of his haters. Bloodline Freestyle is labeled as a 2022 demo, and man, there's a strong idea here. It's a shame it's never going to be seen all the way through. Gotta love when JPEG plays with gospel and soul samples. Every time it feels like he's channeling 05 Yay. Nothing short of spectacular ear candy. The sample was Roberta Flack, so maybe there was some clearance issues preventing him from finishing the record, but damn, Peggy, if you ever feel inclined on finishing this thing, please send this straight to my inbox. I need to hear it. No JPEG on hate, but we do get the return of Freaky over what we can assume is some JPEG production, and the beat goes insanely hard. This one's a vibe. I love the high-pitched saw wave synths. The percussion is the definition of organized confusion, and the low end is punishing. Freaky himself delivers an off-kiltered, messy performance that matches the energy of the instrumental perfectly. I just wish we got a Peggy verse here. And finally, we got Taken, an instrumental track that kicks off with a Biggie Suicidal Thoughts sample. Very nice. The track as a whole is more of a nugget than an entree. A very well put together, catchy little 30-second beat that puts producers to shame. Honestly, this may be Peggy's biggest flex of the record, showing how interesting and engaging he can be with no time. A half-minute Peggy beat is better than a lot of beat makers' best shit. And yeah, man, that's it. I want to say I really appreciate the effort in sequencing this album, and like taking tracks and putting them in the track listing to make them feel effective in the narrative and not just throwing them all at the end of the record like most deluxe albums would. Peggy took to social stating that releasing the director's cut of I Laid Down My Life For You felt liberating in the sense that he could now finally put to bed that era of music and start working on something new. And honestly, that really resonates with me. It does feel like we've closed the book on this experiment. And as always, I'm super excited to see where we're going from here. Now, I won't give this a conventional rating as it is simply a deluxe version of I Lay Down My Life For You. But as I said prior, my rap album of 2024 does belong to JPEG. I give the original iteration of the LP a 10 out of 10. As far as the director's cut release is concerned, I have to say I would consider it essential listening for any JPEGMAFIA, experimental, or abstract hip-hop fan. It feels good to be a fan of an artist whose B-sides are worthy of creating a dialogue. And yeah, man, that's it. So I just wanted to say, I know there was a big break in between this video and the Little Baby video, and it's only my second video, but I wanna be releasing more consistently. You know, I'm not gonna make excuses. It's easy to do that. I want to work as hard as I can to give you guys as much content as possible and, you know, create a community here. I'm really serious about my music criticisms, and I know I have a lot to offer the space. So bear with me. We're figuring things out over here, but you're going to be seeing a lot more in my face. So yeah, I Laid Down My Life For You, 10 out of 10. Director's cut version, essential listening. Check it out, and I'll see you next time. Peace.